Now it's time to break down the card. Kevin Iole is on the road with Yahoo Sports covering the event. Spike TV starts out with some good fights. I just put up on the blog a little while ago that, to me, Tyson Griffin is still one of the elite 155ers in the world. I think he's cheated himself a little bit, and he's been injured, but you get that as a fight, and he's going against Evan Dunham, a dangerous guy, but is it too big a step up for Evan Dunham?
I think Evan Dunham's a pretty good fighter. I mean, I was very impressed with what I saw of him at the Ultimate Fight Night against Fran Escudero. I thought he was finished in that fight, first round. I thought Escudero was going to make short work of him. Dunham came back, had a really strong second round, and then a tremendous third round. So I don't think it's too big of a step up. It is obviously a step up. Tyson Griffin is a championship contender, no doubt about it. I like Griffin in the fight, but I certainly think it's a fight. It should be a good fight, and both of these guys know each other very well.
Another good fight on the Spike card, and on paper it looks even. I think you have to look at quality of competition, though. And yet, with Mac Danzig, his resume is better, but he hasn't won a lot of the fights against elite guys. I think Wyman has made his living against lesser guys, but he's more of a gamer. So how do you read this one, Danzig and Wyman?
I like Wyman in the fight. I just think, Wyman's one of those guys that he puts a lot of pressure on. And it seems to me when Danzig has a lot of pressure, is kind of when he's not at his best. And so I think, it's going to be a pretty good fight. Wyman's going to come out guns a-blazing, really, going after Danzig. And I think if Danzig gets the fight to the ground, then, it turns in his favor. But I like Wyman to win.
It's funny in all these interviews that we do, and I know you do a lot more radio interviews than I do, but when we're leaned on as experts, we're always asked, like, who's the next guy? And you kind of forget some of the guys who are young guys who have been around for a while, who, maybe are ready to turn the corner, haven't fought that much. And to me, that's one of the fights described perfectly with Carlos Condit and Rory McDonald. McDonald hasn't been around for more than one fight, but he's 20 years old, and Condit has been matched up against pretty good guys. He's been off for a while. He's only 26.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things the UFC has is they have a lot of good young fighters. We talked about Tyson Griffin a couple of seconds ago. I include him in that group. Not what a year ago you look at it and you said the UFC has three really good young lightweights who could develop someday: Frankie Edgar, Gray Maynard, and Tyson Griffin. Now you've got Gray Maynard basically fighting an eliminator to get into the championship mix. Frankie Edgar has the title, and Tyson Griffin is right there. I think that's the same thing when you look at McDonald and Carlos Condit. Condit moved up from the WEC, but he's a very skilled guy, a guy that can compete really with pretty much anybody. And I think he's only going to get better. He's a young guy. He's going to add some strength. As he ages and matures. I think that's a terrific fight.
Can you get a read on this fight? Basically, only seeing McDonald one time and knowing that he's 20, this is a pretty good step up, and it would not be a great loss for Carlos Condit.
Yeah, I don't have a real good feel for McDonald yet. So I'm picking Condit because I think Condit's got a pretty well-rounded game. He's been in there with a lot of really good people, Martin Kampmann, Jake Shields, etc. He's fought a lot of good guys, so I'm going to go with Condit in that fight.
Martin Kampmann, like Carlos Condit, I think has been forgotten about a little bit. And those guys went head-to-head. Kampmann edged him out. But then Martin has come in and fought some poor fights. He didn't have a good game plan against Daly. He's actually a pretty sizable dog against Paulo Thiago. What do you think?
I like Thiago in the fight, too. I mean, Thiago's come in, and except for the fight with John Fitch, where, unless you're GSP, you lose to John Fitch. I think that's just kind of a given. He's been very, very impressive, and he's fought top guys. I just think that Thiago overall has a little bit better overall game. I think their games are similar, but Thiago's just a little bit better overall, and he's done it against higher level competition.
You're going to see some good technical fighting with those fights, with Condit up against McDonald. In this fight we just mentioned with Kampmann and Thiago. Technical is not going to be the word that comes to mind when you see Ben Rothwell and Gilbert Yvel.
No, I don't think so. I don't think that's what we're going to talk about. That's going to, be a power against power, size against size type of fight. Gilbert Yvel, is a guy that he knows how to brawl, and I'm trying to think of the right way to phrase this without insulting him, but he's not always within the rules. Kind of if he was in pro wrestling, he'd be a heel.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. But he's a pretty talented striker, and if there's no threat of the fight going to the ground, he can be a dangerous guy. And on the other side, it's a big fight for Ben Rothwell. He wants to kind of revitalize his career, and he is dangerous. He was in much better much better shape the last time around. But then he had to pull out of that card in Australia. So I'm sure he's real hungry to get a win here.
Yeah, I like Rothwell, but I could see Ivel winning this fight. I mean, to me, this is a tough one to call. I'm certainly not convinced. When Rothwell stepped up in better competition, he hasn't looked that good. I mean, just think of how Cain Velasquez thrashed him. Ben talked really good about himself, but he certainly didn't back it up and perform. No shame in losing to Cain, who's one of the elite fighters in the world. But certainly Ben hasn't been at the same level when he's moved up. So, I like Ben, but I'm not real strong behind that.
The others, Rock'em Sock'em is going to be Cro Cop and Pat Barry. Barry has, not grew up, but he's 5 years younger. But he's a guy who idolizes Cro Cop, and any striker should. He's an elite fighter. I like Cro Cop in this fight for the dog number. I still think he has life. I think he has life in his fists. His kicks aren't as good as they used to be, and I think Pat is going to be a little too willing to go into a nose-to-nose battle and may suffer in this one.
I like Pat in the fight. The thing was, I was surprised that Pat was even the favorite. I thought just based on reputation that they would have Cro Cop being the favorite. Pat hasn't faced the elite competition in the UFC that Cro Cop has. But certainly, Pat has great striking, and I think he's going to kick Cro Cop a couple times, and I think it's going to make Cro Cop a little, do I really want to go through this at this stage of my life? If Cro Cop wins, I think it's a good win for him. I think if he beats Pat Barry, it's a good win, certainly.
Yeah, I think it's going to be impressive if he breaks Cro Cop. I know what you're saying. If he kicks him a bunch of times, maybe Cro Cop says the hell with it. I don't know that we've had proof of that. Now, the one fight I look back to in terms of a quality loss was that everyone else has been destroyed by Junior Dos Santos, and Cro Cop stood in there and he gave it back, and he took a beating in that fight. So I don't think he's going to lay down.
But it's now, so now he's had that fight under his belt. Now he comes back. You can't really judge too much the Anthony Parash fight. Parash took it on 1 day's notice. Yeah. So, now he's coming back against Pat Barry. And if he takes some punishment again, does he say to himself, do I want to do this again? Maybe he does. I agree with you. I think that, he did better against Junior Dos Santos than pretty much anybody we've seen. I just think the style of this fight is going to lead to him to getting a lot of, not only, Dos Santos is more just with the hands. This guy is hands and legs, and I think that that double barrel attack will maybe cause Mirko some problems.
What does Chuck Liddell have left, and does Rich Franklin have the mix of well-roundedness? I don't think it's going to the ground, but he's a more technical striker. Does he have the balance that's going to give Chuck a lot of problems? If I knew both of them were at the same level, I would pick Chuck to win the fight. I'm picking Rich to win the fight just because I question, how much Chuck has left. I think Rich has more left of his top of his game than Chuck does of his. Certainly Chuck has the kind of power, and punching power is the last thing to leave you. That if he lands a shot on the chin, I think Rich will go. It's getting to that chin. I think, Rich is going to be elusive, is my guess. Rich is going to try to use his speed, some movement, mix in some kicks and punches, and I think that Rich will win a decision. Well, it'll be telling if Rich takes out Chuck with 1 or 2 punches. That says a lot because, Rich has some one-punch knockouts in the past, but I think over the years he's lost a little of his power. So if Chuck can't handle a huge punch from Rich, that says a lot. And on the other side, Kevin, there are questions about Rich's chin because, obviously Rich has had some trouble. He went out pretty quickly against Belfort.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt. I mean, he's been knocked out, 3 times? Twice by Anderson Silva and once by Vitor Belfort, which, no shame in getting knocked out by guys like that because they're some of the elite strikers in the sport. But, Chuck has the kind of power that those guys have, maybe more in terms of the single one punch. So, I mean, you could see Rich having trouble if Chuck gets to his chin. I think the way that Rich is going to fight is going to be to make sure that, he doesn't put himself at risk, and that makes it difficult for Chuck to land that kind of shot.
If you were going to the sports book, what would you put the lean on? Would you bet the distance or knockout at some point, finish at some point?
I think I would bet the distance. Whatever the will go is, I would bet. I think it's going to go to the scorecards, and I think Rich Franklin will win a decision.